Hello, everyone. Simon Jacob Snare, Meaningful Life. In our new biblical series of taking biblical events and demonstrating their personal, psychological, and emotional relevance to our lives, including at times as well of giving us a deeper understanding in world history and the conflicts of our present times, ultimately all leading us to be able to understand ourselves and our world in better ways, to be able to come up with real solutions to create a better life and a better world. That's a summation of this new series. So in that spirit, I want to speak to you today and talk about a major, you can say, conflict and confrontation. Some call it a clash of civilizations that affects us at times more obvious than others, but on an ongoing basis that can be traced back to close to 3,800 years ago to the home and tent of Abraham. Yes, Abraham, the patriarch, the biblical patriarch. So we'll title this program, we shall title A Meaningful Life, Ishmael and Isaac, a timeless family feud. This program is dedicated by John and Jenny Eisenberg in honor of their new grandson, Max Arav Rachamim Abelor, born on September 27th, 2021. So I remember, as most of us do, when 9/11 took place. So we're talking about now 20 years ago, 9/11. September 11th, 2001, just as the 21st century was beginning to become a new reality. It was also a new millennium. We were beginning the second millennium. You could say the beginning of the third millennium, actually. So the year 2001, where each of us was when the Twin Towers in New York City, as well as the Pentagon, as well as yet another plane that crashed in the fields in Pennsylvania, were attacking the United States in an unprecedented way. And for the first time, events of the Middle East suddenly became a reality here on mainland USA, which was a rarity because the wars that were fought here were the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. But after that, World War I, World War II were fought all in Europe. And Middle Eastern tensions and violence and terrorism, even though there were attacks in the United States, but not quite as it was 9/11. I can tell you from my own personal experience that after that, all my talks and lectures, wherever I went, people were, for the first time, extremely receptive and interested in biblical events. Till that point, if I would quote a story from the Bible, from Abraham, from Isaac, from Ishmael, yeah, some people would be interested, some more, some less. But after 9/11, that changed. Because though Middle East is close to many of our hearts, and Israel, of course, has been at the brunt of attacks and terrorism, and of course the wars, the Middle Eastern conflict between Israel and its neighbors, the Palestinians and the different Arab Muslim countries around it, but it was not brought home quite the same way. So though these ideas that I shared after 9/11, once you hear them, you see how relevant they are, but it was not really appreciated. And frankly, we'd all have preferred that things should have stayed calm. But the fact of the matter is, the Middle East still remains a force right now. Thank God, it's quiet, but not really completely quiet. We all know it's a powder keg. It's like the gas, the toxic energies there can explode at any given moment. We all applaud and celebrate the Abraham Accords that brought some peace between Israel and some of its neighbors. But there's still work to be done, and we're still dealing with a very heavily strong religious environment, Muslim environment that has strong beliefs to the point of many people fighting jihad. I mean, bin Laden is gone, but there are many others that believe religiously that the only way to bring God to this world is by destroying the infidels. So when we look at it, it looks strange to most of us in the Western world because we thought religious wars were a thing of the past, and we don't want to hear about another religious war. We'd rather it be something much more practical. Many in the West also believe that if you just give the Middle East the McDonald's and the Apple products and technology and Amazon, that they'll just become like the Western world. But that's not necessarily the case. So it still remains somewhat of a mystery to many. What exactly are the conflicts about? Are they fighting over land? Are they fighting over oil? Are they fighting over money? It clearly is much more ideological than meets the eye once you begin looking into it, and then you can understand why it's so complicated to create peace, true peace and harmony, not just practical for the short term. What's even more fascinating, as we shall talk about, that all this is microcosmic within ourselves. There's a microcosm of these conflicts and battles within us. Anyone familiar with a mystical and spiritual way of understanding things knows that nothing just happens out there that is just historical or political or economic. Everything is reflecting deeper spiritual, cosmic energies. And when you understand it on that dimension, it's not just escaping into some esoteric, abstract fantasy. It actually helps us understand the very nature of what drives human beings. Because at the end of the day, the biggest question that any child asks, adults don't ask this question any longer because we've gotten used to wars and battles and divisiveness and hostilities and corruption and duplicity and so on. But children ask the question, why should people fight? Why should people fight? You want to have a meaningful life, a loving life, build a healthy family, make sure your children are protected, and so do I. Why should we conflict? Yes, okay, we may conflict over resources, money, who will control certain areas, so we can negotiate. We both want the same thing. And yet you see war is a product of history. It's not an anomaly. So what exactly really lies at the heart of the diversity is beautiful. But how does diversity become divisive? To the point of real hostility, to the point of mistrust and distrust, to the point of battle and war. So very often, like it is with everything, you have to go back to the root. And one of the beautiful things of biblical thinking and biblical ideas and personalities and events, that it gives us the root of events before they became amplified and became on a national and global level. So here we have the story of Abraham. Abraham has a child called Ishmael with Hagar, because Abraham was unable to have children with his wife Sarah. Sarah suggested, have a child with Hagar, and they give birth to a child called Ishmael. Then, miraculously, Abraham and Sarah are able to have a child, and they do have a child later called Isaac. Isaac and Ishmael are an interesting study, because they would both be progenitors of nations to come. Ishmael is the father and ancestor of the Arab and later Muslim world. Isaac, the ancestor and father and patriarch of the Jewish world. And the plot thickens, which we'll talk about in coming weeks, because Isaac would have two children, twins, Jacob and Esau, and Esau is the ancestor and father of Rome, of the Western Roman Christian world. So we're focusing on what is this week's chapter that talks about Isaac and Ishmael, but you see how the plot thickens, how it broadens. And when you can understand that they were in conflict, it can help us understand how their children and descendants that ultimately became nations of their own have conflicts, because they did begin with ideological, spiritual conflicts. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. This feud between Ishmael and Isaac, half brothers, both shared a father called Abraham, two different mothers. And you find that Sarah, the mother of Isaac, tells Abraham, Ishmael is a bad influence on Isaac. I want you to send them away. And he does. He doesn't want to, but he sends Ishmael and his mother Hagar away. God protects them, but they were sent away. What was the conflict there? And it doesn't really state it. It just says there was something going on. But when you look into the soul, the spiritual and mystical and esoteric teachings, you discover Abraham had done something revolutionary, pioneering. Abraham introduced the idea that life is not egocentric, but God-centric. In simple English, we're not here just to serve ourselves. We're here to serve others, to serve a higher cause, to experience a higher state of consciousness, and to connect to a higher reality. This was a pioneering and trailblazing approach to life because it countered everything that was going on in his world. The pagan world focused far more on control and power, materialism, and success on that level. You can say it's not surprising, we still have that conflict, don't we? But Abraham did introduce the father of monotheism, the father of all nations, became the patriarch, became the prophet that all major religions follow. Of course, Judaism first, Christianity and Islam. And even, they say, Buddhism. You have words like Brahmin and other words, many words that seem to associate with a Brahmin as an Abraham. Which isn't surprising because the Bible does talk about Abraham sending his children with a certain set of beliefs and philosophies to the east. However you turn it, Abraham is a key figure in understanding the future of the world. Because had Abraham introduced the concept, as we're told, of justice, of virtue, of kindness, of compassion, that yes, we forego our own personal comforts and our own self-interest for being virtuous, being kind. That's what Abraham dedicated himself and his family to. So here he has two children, Ishmael and Isaac. Seemingly all's good. They're both following Abraham's path. It should lead to only harmony and beautiful peace. And yet it wasn't so simple. Because Abraham did live in a time of tensions. What that means is the material world was not ready to just surrender to spirituality and to higher consciousness. Maybe they would if it was on their terms. Back to control. How do you deal with a world, a material world that's hostile to spiritual, ethereal, and refined values? So there are three ways. You can ignore it, which obviously is just avoiding the issue. You can go to war with it, or you learn to transform that world. I should say there's another path, a path of asceticism, which is not just avoidance, but finding a life on a mountain where you avoid the challenge. But it's still a form of avoidance but it is a path. It's a path of asceticism. Isaac, I should go with Ishmael and Isaac, both chose different paths. Ishmael was the warrior. He was a much more stronger path. And because of his religious passion, actually, you see, Ishmael actually comes from the word Yishmakel, God should listen. Because Ishmael was a man of prayer, as his mother was. They prayed. And the fervor of passion and religion saw the world around them as a conflict and therefore went with a far more, a very aggressive approach. That's why it says Ishmael, it says, Yodeh Bakel V'yad Kol Boy, his hand is everywhere and everything within him. A type of no boundaries. Now, I should say war is not really the right word because that really is reserved for his son-in-law. Later we learn about Esau as the warrior. But Ishmael also inherited from Abraham a type of love, a deep love. But love needs to be disciplined. And for Ishmael, the boundaries were not there. And therefore, there was a confusion between the spiritual values and how do you actually integrate them into the world around you. Isaac was a man of discipline, was a man of, in the Kabbalistic terminology, Gevura. Ishmael, Chesed. So Chesed is a lot of love, but a love also that when you're dealing with a conflict, what can you do? You need to oppose it. Yitzchak was initially a disciplined person with boundaries. So his approach was far more based on boundaries. You have to create boundaries between the material and the spiritual. Ultimately, that too has its challenges because it's still not full integration. But Ishmael and his half-brother Isaac each had different approaches, and therefore in their personal lives there was also a conflict. The conflict between Chesed and Gvura. Abraham's Chesed was a Chesed that was a very humble Chesed. Ishmael's Chesed and love was a very aggressive Chesed. And whereas Isaac was far more disciplined. In our own lives, what do you do when you have this challenge? Let's say your child comes home from school and did something wrong. You can go with an approach that basically ignores it or just Just you pour on love, but without boundaries, and therefore you can create a spoiled child. Love is beautiful, but it has to have boundaries. You can take the other approach, discipline. Isaac's approach. Discipline also needs to be boundaried, because too much discipline without love won't work as well. And these two conflict with each other when you don't have the proper balance. And hence, they could not get along with each other. Fast forward, turn the clock forward, this would evolve into two nations that have a very different approach to life. Isaac, the disciplinarian, and Ishmael, the giver without boundaries. And that would lead to ultimately two different approaches that do not get along with each other. The boundaries are critical because without boundaries, you don't have structure. And without structure, you really cannot integrate anything. When it comes to this battle between living a spiritual life, a life of values in the material world, if you just go without any boundaries, it becomes a totally confusion. If you go with an approach that has boundaries, you are at least laying the ground for some type of balance. When you see what happened in the last century, and especially in the last few decades, religious wars, which were once the domain not of the Muslims actually, it was the domain of the Christians actually, and others that fought religious wars. What do you see? It's about the name of God. The only way to bring God to this world is to eliminate the opposition. So you say, how is that consistent with love? Well, that's like a flood. It's a love that doesn't have disciplines. So the only way is either you love completely or you destroy that which you cannot control. Isaac's approach is one of discipline. Discipline means, yes, we need to look at those that are different than us, but understand that things take a process until you finally create a type of peace and harmony. The ultimate peace and harmony would happen in the next generation with Jacob. But at this stage of the game, you have these two forces, Chesed and Gvura. Now, the truth is each of them has a virtue the other does not have. This is not about one winning and the other losing. It's about finding the proper balance. So when you look at events through history, you look at the conflicts of being either too permissive or too restrictive, that's where all the battles take place. You need the balance between the two. In our personal lives, we all have a Yishmael and an Isaac within us. We have the giving love that sometimes needs to have controls and be seasoned and be tempered. And we have the disciplinarian within us. You really need both to be a healthy human being. So when you're faced with a situation that is hostile to your belief system, do you go with aggression? Do you go with total permissiveness? Everything goes? Or do you have some discipline? And of course, that is not an easy thing. It's easier said than done, because the fact of the matter is that when you get down to it, it's hard. How do you really balance the two? How do you teach your child what you did was inappropriate, but you also don't demoralize your child? Discipline needs to be measured as well. But there you have two so-called archetypes, and essentially two personality types that allow us to look at ourselves and look at history, and you'll see this conflict play itself out many, many times. What we ultimately need is a synthesis of the two. And that will come in the next generation, when Esav and Jacob will confront each other, where there you'll have the confrontation of total aggression and war, without the chesed, and Jacob, the balance, the harmony, and the beauty that brings together the love and the discipline. But in this stage where we are right now, it's about looking at two features, two qualities, two archetypal resources, or you could say emotional faculties that each of us has. And one is the giving, but you need to know when to stop giving, and discipline, and knowing when discipline also needs to be controlled. And both of them, when they faced head on without that balance, will be a conflict. And that conflict plays itself out throughout history and in our personal lives. This is, in a nutshell, a bit of this family feud and how its implications as it developed throughout history. As we continue this story, you'll see how this all comes to life in so many different ways in our own times. As I said, both on a microcosm and a macrocosm, on a personal level and on a cosmic level. And the key is obviously to get to the root. Once you know the root, what can we do to temper the unbridled love of Ishmael, and to as well use a healthy form of discipline, and bring the two together, that these two brothers can live side by side, which ultimately does happen. Later on, Yishmael does reconcile with Isaac in the latter part of their lives. So, my friends, let us all look at these two forces within us and try to find ways to balance it within ourselves. And when we do that on a microcosmic level, it has a ripple effect that can allow it also to spread and express itself in the larger world, the butterfly effect. Thank you so much. This is Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Live, every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, but it's recorded and you can look up into the archives on all the different platforms and channels. Please share your thoughts, your feedback, your comments, as well as any questions you may have. Share with friends, share with others. It's always an honor and pleasure to speak to you. Simon Jacobson here. Everyone be well, be healthy. Balance that chesed and gvura, that love and discipline within yourself. Thank you.